All right, let's get into it immediately. So this is a long-term review of the Stryd Foot Pod. So I have this on the at a zero, uh, something, I can't remember the name of the shoe. Anyway, so this is I've had this foot pod now for a while, going on 2 years. There's quite a lot of information already on the internet about this specific pod, but I wanted to kind of give my own long-term review of it. The premise behind why I got it initially was that I'm like an Apple Watch user. Well, it doesn't really matter the watch, but what matters more is that I do a lot of indoor running. So I live in Canada, the eastern part of Canada, and it's really, really, really cold during the winter. And treadmills don't track your pace super accurately. So you need we don't need is the operative word. No one needs this as a product, but it's a great accessory to have if you're doing a lot of indoor training. As I got to the point where I wanted just accurate data, and I just found it really annoying to use just my watch and then having like all this information, whether it's track workouts or treadmill workouts. Or the instantaneous pace is really nice. I think I paid at the time $250 for the pod, and the deal was then you got a reduced price for the purchase of the pod, and then you had to pay a monthly fee for 6 months of $15. The subscription has gone up for the Stryd membership now. So there's a lot of things that I like about Stryd from a hardware perspective, some things I don't necessarily like from a software perspective. From a hardware perspective, it's very hard wearing. The battery life is fantastic. It does last several weeks, and it does come with an included charging puck. So for example, if you're going to charge it, you take it out of the little unit and you plug it into the actual little pod itself. Very straightforward. And then you can just clip it back into its actual seam. And then depending on the actual shoe that you're using, it's either a little bit complicated, depending on the shoe. Some are depending on the lacing pattern of your actual shoe. The at a zero Evo SLs, given that the tongue is quite low down here, it's a little bit complicated, but it's not a big deal. You can put a little bit forward facing and it's not the end of the world. So the things I like about it: hard wearing. It serves its purpose as an extremely niche running product, but it fits into the larger ecosystem of just, I think the cost benefit analysis is worth it for long-term indoor accuracy, especially if you live in an environment that's not equatorial and it's quite cold and you want reliable information. So I think if you do get to a point where you're just annoyed with having non-accurate data, I think as a niche product in the running market, I think it's fantastic. The things I don't like about the product, I found the software side is very basic, and I don't think from a personal perspective, the membership is necessarily worth it if you are an individual has a quite a depth knowledge of training itself. The whole question of training with power, I think from a consumer perspective, is a really, really hard sell. I've seen other reviewers such as DC Rainmaker allege that the demand for power-based training is virtually non-existent on the larger sort of wearable marketplace demand. So like there's also the adaptive training that's now accessible from a consumer side on the software side for Stryd. So there's the pod, but then there's an ecosystem behind the pod where you can do training. There's like Steve Palladino, marathon, 5K, 10K trainings that are all built in. For me, I always found that the software or the training was just annoying because I didn't necessarily care enough about power. I only bought this product for pacing strategies specifically, or just accurate pacing overall on the treadmill. So I didn't find it super useful from a software perspective. Now, I want to add a massive caveat. That doesn't mean that as a product it's not useful. It just wasn't useful for me. My typical type of, I would argue, my consumer profile or my customer profile, why I bought it, was not what necessarily I wanted from a software perspective. I just wanted the hardware. So those are the things I don't like. Is the product. One thing that really matters to me is consumer protection. So also asking myself the question whether or not this product is accessible on the market. It is. It's very easy to get a hold of. it's very reliable, and Gus, one of the individuals from Stryd, is very receptive on all of the social media channels. So overall, is it worth, like, what's the interest in this? I am not entirely sure unless you're a power zealot. From a consumer side, I like it as part of my, like, I would call it my training kit, where like, we live in obviously the eastern part of Canada where it's always cold. We had a and even if it's not necessarily cold, the streets are always covered in snow. So you have to be very mindful of where you're training. And I love being able to, if I'm traveling to go see family in another part of the country, I can hop on the treadmill at a local gym and I get accurate pacing wherever I'm going. If I want to trip with my family somewhere else and it's nice and warm, at that point, like, the Apple Watch Ultra that I'm using has dual band GPS, so does it really matter at that point? I don't know. So I think as a value add, it's very niche. I like the purpose that it serves, and also the Stryd app is super super simple to use. I have to give the software team a lot of credit because the actual, like, the software itself is extremely smooth to use. And it's, yeah, extremely simple. Obviously, when you're inside the Stryd app itself, highly recommend it. Very simple to use, very intuitive. And there's a lot of sort of little nice add-ons within the system, so you can have music control. That's all I got. Is it worth it? It's up to you. But I don't like those answers. Is if it's worth it. If you're a hardcore runner and you want all the max data, I would argue it's worth it. If you're an average consumer of running products and you're using tools as a means to an end for running, I would argue no. I don't think that's the target audience for this type of product, I would argue. I find sometimes the ecosystem within the sort of wearable space to be a little bit inundated with passive, is this the right word? It doesn't matter. Anyways, there's sometimes a inability to critique a product, or an inability to give someone a definitive answer as to whether or not it's worth it. I would say it is worth it because I've gotten a lot of value out of this product, even though I'm not the intended user of it. I think it's fantastic for the sort of very narrow space it does take up within my training kit. So that's all I got. Make sure to subscribe, all the usual stuff.